Today on our Tech for Business podcast, we're joined by Kelsey, our AI operations coordinator, here to talk about the difference between AI and automation. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think people use these terms interchangeably. I think people, especially people who are not deep in the tech trenches, are just sort of using whatever word works for their sentence. So could you really quickly just give us basic, simple terms, what the difference between automation and AI is?
Yes, 100%. And that's such a great question because I totally agree that it's a confusing minefield of what is marketing speak and what is it actually. Automation follows the rules that you give it. That's point blank. That's how I describe an automation. AI figures out the rules, which I know sounds scary, but that's essentially right, kind of going into the Venn diagram. One does the task, the other one decides how the task should be done. So that's kind of right, the very basic, very top level. And you know me, if I had to give it some sort of analogy, something to say, hey, this is how you think about it. Automation is a dishwasher, right? You press start, the cycle happens, your dishes are clean, voila. AI is a cook in the kitchen. We want both in the kitchen, but you don't want the dishwasher to do the cooking. You don't want it to taste and sample and go, I want to add this flavor and I want to decide which things go into the pot out of the fridge, right? They don't overlap, but the cook still uses the dishwasher, if that makes sense at all.
Totally. Yes, it does. I think that is a beautiful explanation. It's very simple, it's very digestible, and it totally makes sense to me because then we can kind of layer that in our conversation. We might go that direction of like, well, how is the human element? You could be the chef and the AI is now the sous chef and they're using the dishwasher or they're using like the blender. Like those could be automations.
Right. It's Ratatouille and the little chef of kind of going, you're the rat. You're the rat. I hate to say that you're the rat, but you're the rat. AI is linguini. Hopefully we're not getting any copyright things. And then the tools in the kitchen are automation. So yeah, had to bring it back.
Where does that confusion really come from? Why are people using them interchangeably?
Yeah, you ready for I'm going to point a finger. I was a past marketer, right? You and I worked together. I'm going to point a finger for a hot second at marketing. Yeah, we've done it. We know it. Right. It's the AI became the hot term. So vendors slapped AI on everything. Yeah. But to bring it back also from a user perspective, it feels similar. The computer is just doing something for you and it feels slightly magical. It's doing it faster. It's doing it better. So how would you know unless, as you pointed out, you're in the trenches making it, what it's doing? Even some of these tools like Zapier or we work with a tool Monday.com that does automations. How would you know if they're using AI within the automation? It becomes such a AI can start the automation, AI can build the automation, AI can be a step in the automation, right? But I think that's where some of the confusion comes in is you're going, you can simplify it out, but know that it still has our favorite term. It depends. But I think if we had to say it's a marketing problem, it's that AI badge, it's that AI sparkle, it's all of these tools that we go to buy and they go, we have AI. It may have just been an automation that they souped up a little bit, but they're saying that it's AI because that sounds more attractive than saying we have automations.
Yeah, that's totally true. So this is completely an opinion, but does it matter then to know the difference?
I'm sure that there's people.
It's completely an opinion.
It's an opinion. There's definitely going to be people that are like, you should know for this reason. I am not that personality. To be brutally honest, it doesn't matter to me more than as an AI role, token usage. Am I using more than I need to in order to accomplish this? That's when it matters to me which one I'm using is you can go real ham with AI and say, I made it and it does everything and it's great, but I'm frustrated because it changes this every time or it does this every time. And you're right. That's where I'd go, what's the experience that you're hoping to have? And what's the real priority and expectation of the output?
Process and output, it kind of matters when you're consuming resources.
100%. And I think when you're sitting and you're going, oh, I need to plan for my business and I need to plan to use AI because we have this OKR to use AI, right? We hear it all the time. 74% of SMBs are already using AI without knowing it because it's baked into their tools. So you're kind of going again, the measuring OKR. I saw an article and I could link it below, but it was talking about measuring OKRs for AI was not how you're using AI. It was what the output would affect in the output of people, right? How often they had to change the output of AI, whether or not it was actually saving them time. That's what they were positioning as the OKR. And I thought that was really interesting to think about because I think it's a similar way automations are also measuring output. But
Yeah.
anyways, a little bit of a tangent, but going, yes, when you're saying, does it matter? For most end users, no, because you're just experiencing the output. If you're on the architectural end, yes, you should probably know a little bit more at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And again, I'm going on a tangent, but kind of reiterating that outcome is almost so important to start with. Like, where do you want to end rather than like making sure we're using AI or making sure we're using automation? It's where you end up that's more important. And then we can kind of backtrack from there and use the correct tool. Like, is it an automation? Is it AI? Is it a combination of both?
Really. And that was somebody internally I was having a discussion with. They also use AI, but for our customers. And he was saying, he's like, I'm watching you work, and I feel like you're the person at the head of the boat. And immediately I picture Nate Bargatze as George Washington. So if anybody's listening, hang on to that visual. It's just past the fourth. So yes, we're going to go there. And they're like, he's like, you're the person at the front of the boat, and you're just going, go there, go there. And he goes, then there's AI actually doing the rowing. And then there's your technical, right? The people that are securing it, the people that are making sure everything is set up correctly, technically, are the rudder in the back to go. Okay, but you're going, but I'm going to kind of course correct you just a little bit
Yeah.
to make sure this is being secure. And so I was like, that was another kind of interesting metaphor is, yeah, you're not doing all three tasks. You're knowing what fits in what place, and you have a clear, this is what I'm working towards.
I want to pull apart these differences a little bit more. So let's start with automation because I think people, whether they know it or not, have more experience with that part of it. So, what is automation designed to do inside of an organization, or where have we potentially experienced it before?
So if I had to say again, really boil down, it's
Yeah.
repetitive, predictable work. Same task, same way, faster with no mistakes. That's what you use automations to get. A few examples of that would be invoices, onboarding, moving data, password resets, right? Any of it, essentially, I hate to call it boring, but boring is what it is, the boring, repeatable stuff. So your people do the work that actually needs a person versus the automation going, I take this one cell in an Excel, and I copy it over to this other Excel. You're like, yeah, I personally would hate doing that. That's like watching paint dry to me. I have zero patience for it. So I hate to say that's my parameter for that, but saying if there's very little creative and it's 100% you do A, you do B, you do C, it's right. Monday.com, you go. I change the status of this to working on it. So it moves to a group that's called working on it. You don't need a human to know that. That's very straightforward. The status goes to this group, and then you can kind of branch it out from there if there's other dependencies. But the other thing to mention there is automations can be automations calling other automations. So the smaller you make them to begin with. So A, it's easier to find where the failure is, but B, it is easier to understand. And taking that time to document out what each step is doing and the intent behind it is definitely something that I've learned along the way making automations is saying, I can just set it up and I can go. But then when I go back to troubleshoot it, if I don't have this is why I set this up here because it's connected to another system. That's a little bit of the pitfall, but is that kind of, I know I tangented just a little bit there, but automations in a nutshell.
Yeah, for sure. So then how does AI come into play? Like, how does it build on what we've already created?
Yeah,
Or how
so
does it do something different than the automation?
totally. So, right, automation, every rule spelled out for you. AI handles then the judgment and then kind of, for lack of a better term, messy stuff that nobody scripted for it. Something like reading emails, calls, documents. And then if you look at the newest wave of AI, right, which we call agentic, plans its own steps. So, right, while there are steps to both, AI can take something like the transcript of this podcast and can look through and try to find nuances and get a little creative with it, right? Temperature is what we call it in the AI world for how creative do you want to get or how straight to the point do you want to be? Higher temperature, more creative. That's a whole nother podcast. We get into that. But essentially, to say automation follows your map exactly. AI figures out a new route when the road is closed.
That is great. Okay. So we kind of already answered my next question, which is like when you're using one and when you're using other. I guess, can you give an example of when you might use just AI and then without the automation part of it? Because they feel so connected. Like they feel so integrated already in our conversation. So when is there a time when you're only using AI?
So I hate
Part
to use the it depends. I'm like, to be brutally honest, I don't think that you can separate them out with the way
Yeah.
that AI works at its core to
Yeah.
even find the information that it's outputting to you. However, from a user experience, if you were like, look, I'm not building agents, I just want to get it and I just want to use it. I look at it as saying, I'm going to use Cloud Cowork because it's nice visual and it's something that I work in every day. There is something they call scheduled tasks, which, right, for the sake of this conversation, we'll say is like an automation. It has a trigger. It has something that you give it that then does the steps that uses AI within those steps, looks at call transcripts, writes it to my Notion, puts it into an artifact, which is essentially a visual way for me to look at it and digest my day. If I was to use just Claude Chat,
Mhm. That's what I was
that
thinking.
would
Yeah.
be, yeah, the furthest, the essentially our first blush at using AI as we think of it today. I'm
Yeah.
using air quotes there solely for the fact of saying there's so
Yeah.
many definitions to AI. Spell check was a type of bright machine learning. You're like, you could get into that whole rabbit hole, but we won't. But if you just sat down to just chat with Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, I don't care which platform, that has less automations in the true sense of it's not being triggered or run on a certain schedule or rerun. You are going for a one-time task to get a one-time answer. I am bringing it an email template and saying, can you find links that support my claims that I'm sending within the email? Can you find data to back up what I'm about to talk about in this podcast? I don't need that to be a regular thing unless I am your featured guest every single month on the podcast. And then I go, hey, when Ariel schedules this, then do this stuff for me, which
Yeah.
is where you go. Some of your chats can become
Yeah.
scheduled, but not everyone needs to be scheduled. I don't need 3 times a day for it to check my meetings. I'm not on that many meetings. It's going to keep on running and telling me my dream stinks.
I feel like we have a pretty good base of what the differences are when you're using one, when you're using other. So I want to talk more business level because that's who's listening to this podcast, people working in the industry. Is there ever a time that a business could over rely on that automation or without AI? Like, what are they really missing when they're just, you mentioned it before with the OKRs, they're just trying to hit those OKRs and use these things. What does that sort of look like for a business?
Yeah. So I think especially right because you see a lot of people that go, okay, I'm going to use automations because it feels safe. It feels predictable. There's none
Yeah.
of this AI, what I'm going to call magic again. That's really
Yeah.
just technology that says, hey, I'm going to do these things. So, right, you set it up, it runs smooth. And then when it breaks, it dumps it on a human. It's efficient, but it's stiff and it misses the pattern within its own data. So, right, I'm like, if I had an analogy, it's you built this beautiful car. It looks great. You put on the test track and it went every single time. And you said, yep, don't need headlights. We're running on a daylight track. This is fine. And then you go to put on an actual road with bends and things like rain. And you're going, yeah, once that starts happening, it's really scary to watch that go. And I think for business users, if it's something like I'm going to automate an invoice, which I said was a great example, 100% stand behind that. However, if you have so many, what I'm going to label here as edge cases, right? All of these use cases that you didn't plan for.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden, this automation has sent out 100 invoices to 100 customers that are wrong. Is the experience of your customer, the time spent going and peeling all that back, right? Which is kind of where you go, yeah, was that worth it? And did we spend so much time implementing it and testing it only just to roll it back? Some people go, I'm not going to do it. I can rely on a human, right? Because they can make the judgment calls, which I think is correct, but can still be built in, which is where you kind of go. That's why pilot things are great with human review steps to check these things. And it is something where, right, I went down the path of building out an invoice automation in Power Automate. And I was like, yep, I'll use an AI prompt and this will be great. And then I was like, but we're getting all these different invoices types that I can't even account for. I can't even give the prompt. And then I was going back and I was changing the JSON and it was back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then I was like, there's got to be a better way that I'm trying to throw automation at something that, quite frankly, needs to be built into a visual dashboard for a human to go, I'm going to train you what this looks like to then push the data into our accounting system in the expected format, which is still an automation piece of it. But you're kind of going, if you have so many automations, it's a lot for a human to oversee. And yes, you can have
Yeah.
AI triage and oversee, but right, I'm like, I'm going to bring back the Monday.com example. When I transitioned my role, right, I was like, I said about these automations for marketing. Woo! It was like 500 automations that I just had to be like, here, another user. Like, here you go. And right now, Monday.com has AI built in and you can chat with it and they can fix these things for you and all of these good, beautiful things. But that was a perfect example of going, if you have one person at your company, and if you're an SMB that may not be a dedicated automations person, that may just be the person who figured it out operationally because it was helping them do their job. If they left and if there's no documented process behind it and it just feels like this thing that happens for you, what's going to be the impact on your business when that leaves? Which, yes, there's not an instant answer to, but I would go, man, start having AI study your automations and document that for you
Yeah.
because that's at least a first step.
Yeah, I was gonna say even
Yeah.
just like a consistent little crawler who's like AI that's just an auditor that like spits out, here's what I found that isn't documented or isn't, is being this process doesn't need to be here. Some of that is incredibly helpful. I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but
Agreed. Then I'm like, we can get to like the set up your processes. It's gonna,
yeah,
but
all the
yes.
things, yes. But let's take a step back. Okay. So all these businesses have their OKRs, they have their goals. Let's use more AI. Can go wrong without the appropriate groundwork. I mean, it's we're very excited. We all want to jump into the deep end. Even now, I'm having a totally different conversation. I want to go on these tangents, but we have to step back. We have to sort of figure out what are our outcomes, what are our goals, what are our resources. So what does it look like what goes wrong if we're jumping into that deep end as a business.
Yeah. And I think I absolutely love that I get to work cross departmentally, but it's given me a lot of my biggest pitfall where I go, I made this and it's great and it's AI, is not having the process clearly documented by the teams doing it before I start. That's where you're going to burn the money because you're not only spending time now in the world of token usage and different, I don't care which AI platform you're using, you're still doing a subscription if you're using something like Claude Code or Codex for ChatGPT. You're getting a subscription with usage. So I'm sitting here and I'm going, yep, I'm going to prototype that out or I'm going to build out a script. Well, then if I come back and they say, well, you did it because you thought that our sales handoff was it goes from here and then it goes to this team and then it's here. But we actually need to ping it to these 5 other teams who all work in different systems. And I go, well, it's fixable, but it's the same thing as kind of going, it's summer, so I'll use the sandcastle idea of, right, somebody going, I want you to build me a sandcastle. And I go, 100%, let's do this thing. And I build this beautiful 3-tier Disney sandcastle. And they say, actually, we wanted it to look more like Apple's campus. And for me to be like, well, let me just knock all of this down and build it here.
Yeah.
But it's the void of saying, if you have a messy process or if you have bad data that you didn't clean up, AI is going to make the smart decision that then falls into a void. Because I hear it a lot in my position that people go, well, AI is stupid. And I'm going, well, it's also a tool.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly useful tool. And yes, you can benchmark it against IQ and lovely things like that. But it's just going to take whatever you have. And I think I said it on one of our LinkedIn Live. It's a mirror back to your data and what you're doing. So unless you have a clear process, I don't care what you're trying to measure afterwards. Oh, we're trying to save number of time spent on an accounting process. Great. I love that goal. What's your process now? Because as much as me personally is the personality type that I want to go in and throw gasoline on it and go, let's just assume we don't have to do any of that. Let's do this instead. I still need to understand the world in which you're living.
Yeah.
Because without that, I'm going, this is going to take more time and it's going to be more meetings. And that's why tools like Scribe, which, right, we do use internally. And there's part of Codex that can now just record your computer and learn what you're doing and then replicate that back to you. There's all of these ways of doing it. There's all of these tools that you don't have to manually sit down or sit down in a meeting and shadow somebody. You can just go through your workday and say, I'm going to click, I'm just going to have it record, I'm going to have it do what it wants. That gives me enough as somebody creating the AI or the automation to even make that gut call of which one it should be because I need to have that. But as soon as you sit down and somebody goes, well, we're going to pull in this team member and then this person does this and this person does this. And I go, what's the process? And they go, well, we're working on documenting it. That should be your first kind of flag of saying it's not AI ready yet. And to maybe refocus on saying, can you use AI to give you visibility into your data? And then ask it, how would you clean up this data? How would you make this usable? My end goal is automating X. Because again, it's the linguini of it all. He can go, I can grab this and I can grab this and I can shake this just so.
Yeah.
And you're kind of going, it's my favorite part about using AI. It's trained off of so much data of so many people that I'm going, there's somebody that knows it better. One of my favorite prompts is to go, how would Google do this process internally? My other favorite is, how would Steve Jobs look at this? Because most of the time that's focused on the end experience for the user, the team.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite reframing of it all, of saying, again, it's going to save your business money in the long term if the experience for your team, down to your customer, down to your clients, whoever they are, is your North Star.
Yeah.
because you can sit and go, I need to clean up my data. But if you don't know why you're cleaning up your data beyond the fact of saying, I need to clean up my data, I need to use AI, you're just going to keep on burning through it. So you're just going to put AI in a broken process and get the wrong answer faster and spend more money on it.
I just want to highlight and like reiterate, because I think people hear this and they're like, oh, I have a workflow. I know my workflow. I know my process. I will just automate that. I'll use AI and it'll be great. There are always these like hidden steps that just as a human you do and you have never processed or you've never written down, or it just is something that you have done. Oh, we always send this email to this person when an invoice comes in, and that's never documented anywhere. It's just expected. So it makes it hard to then put it into a machine and a tool that does not think that way. So you have to start thinking differently about your work, is basically what I'm saying. And yeah, just
100%.
reiterating what you have already said and how hard that can be upfront if you've never done it before, you know?
Well, and to be kind of that self-critical, which is where
Yeah,
100% I go, have a tool criticize you, have something impartial, because it's like having your friend, right, look at something that
yeah,
you did and go, what do you think? Give me the honest truth. I'm going, yeah, right. You hear
yeah,
it, people going, well, AI is super helpful. It'll tell whatever you want. Well, if you tell it to critique what you're doing, it's going
yeah,
to critique what you're doing.
right.
Give it that freedom. I think it was somebody at Anthropic called it railroading AI. Don't give it so much direction. That's an automation.
Right.
Just to say, this is what I'm doing. Listen to my meeting transcript where I explain this to a new hire. Where could I have done this better? Where
Yeah.
could we have automated this? And right, and kind of, I'm going to bring it back for just a moment before we go
Yeah.
on, because I was like, I had a stat that I didn't bring up that 95% of Gen AI pilots showed zero bottom line impact. And that was from MIT in 2025.
Jeez.
Zero bottom line impact. Which again, we're sitting in 2026, so it's been
Yeah.
a hot second. Things have changed. However, that is right. It's something that I heard at TechCon, which is our annual conference this year. People going, keep on telling me I need to use AI, but I feel like it's not impacting my business and I feel like I'm just spending money on it. And again, I don't have the answer. I'm not in their business. I'm not,
Yeah.
but in my own daily life and what I'm doing here, you do need that process and self-awareness of you can't just keep on accelerating things that are fixed. And it is this technology. I know Kyle said in a past podcast, it's shifted. Technology has shifted. So you can't look at it and say, well, I'm just going to keep on doing the same things and just throw AI at it and we're going to do more of the same things and we're going to be great. And you're going, okay, AI can do that, but did you even look at the why of why that was done in the first place? Because
Yeah.
maybe it was done that way as a reaction to the technology that you had in the moment. And especially as your business grows, it's why you see so many startups built on AI now. It is so much easier to start from scratch and say, do all this for me and put in
Yeah.
AI. Here you go. Anything that new that I get to create is fabulous. I love it. No notes. Anything that I have to go, here's something we've done for 30 years. And I'm going, why does that one thing go to this one inbox? And why does this thing go to another inbox? And why are we copy and pasting that over there? And they go, because that's the best that we could do at the moment that we could do it.
The time. Yeah. It was the
And
right process for the
100%.
time. And
Yep.
I do have to say, and we're going to move on in just a second. I know I'm tangenting, but I do have to say sometimes I will come back. I'll say, how can I make this process better? I've done it recently. And it says this and this and this are redundant. And I'm like, that's fine, because I, as the human, know that I need that redundant step, or I need that email to go to that person. Like sometimes I need to keep those processes that AI is not the best path, because I, as the human, have a larger understanding of how our business works, you know? So again, it's a tool. it has great suggestions, but it might not always be the right next step, you know? Like, and that's fine.
Yep.
It's a tool. That's
Exactly.
what we're using it
And
for.
that is such a great example too of going, you can't remove the human
Yeah.
experience. You're using a tool 100%. But part of what I did with my own even work Claude was, right, I have all these personality tests, whatever, things that I've done, things that we've done at work. And I was like, look, you know my Myers-Briggs, you know my working genius, you know all of these things. How would you improve my processes and change my communications and point out my blind spots? And it was like, girl, you hate doing that. I'm going to do that for you. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
thank you for
that's
that.
awesome.
But again, it's the context of how much can it know through data? Because I think your example is a great point. It maybe can't know the experience of working between marketing and sales and what that looks like at CIT
Yeah.
versus what logically it should look like, which I'm not saying is a right or wrong, or saying there's somebody who prefers this type of communication. If I communicate with you as a former direct coworker, that's going to be a little different than somebody that I don't normally reach out to. AI is not gonna know that. So right, I'm like, I do have a notion that will store after all of my calls that are recorded the context and what I've talked about each person. Two, I know people use Obsidian where they label the second brain. I don't care how you do it. You could do it within Copilot and put it into a Word doc. If it's not data, AI doesn't know it. It may be trained off of other data sets. And yes, we may not all be unique little butterflies, but you have to at least point it to the right data of saying, that's how I look at the world this way. So I'm going to train you like an assistant who would work with me and go, this is your Starbucks order. Hey, if you have a lot of meetings today, you should definitely make sure that there's time to go to Starbucks. Thank you. Right. It's the same thing that you would do with a human. But then to your point, the whole goal of this is to give you more time for human interactions and things that humans need. So what you're saying is still 100% the most important thing. What is the actual experience of the person on the receiving end of what you're creating? Because that should still be the main focus.
We have taken a crazy journey in this conversation because we started with like what AI and automation are. And we basically were just like, in the end, it's a tool. Don't take out the human. Like, and that kind of feels like a beautiful place. I know I had some other questions, but it feels like a beautiful place to kind of wrap up. But I do want to open it up if there's any last minute things you want to share or parts of this conversation you want to highlight as we wrap.
I agree. I think the last thing to kind of, because we talked about it being a tool, which I agree is a great place to end. Instead of chasing, we need AI, start getting, for lack of a better term, enamored with the problem. Start being really, really interested in problems. Instead of buying a bunch of AI tools and saying this is going to give us the competitive advantage, take the time to find problems. Maybe it's giving a couple power users AIs to help you find the problems. Because as we talked about, it's hard to be self-aware of what you're doing. So to have kind of that non-bias, I'm just going to go in.
Yeah.
But I think we talk AI, we talk automation, platforms, tools. At the end of the day, they're not going to help if you don't know what your problem is.
Yeah.
And your problem may not be the thing that you think it is. I essentially vibe coded a CRM off of 7 things that were automation problems.
Yeah.
That I was like, the problem is that we were trying to make a PSA system function as a CRM. And everything else was a symptom.
Yeah.
It was not
Yes.
the core problem. It's going, I'm just going to keep on taking Tylenol every day instead of realizing that maybe your pillow is pinching a nerve in your neck while you sleep. Right? You're going, yeah. So again, don't just label the problem and then go, this is the only problem. Find as many problems as you can. Do the straight out crazy conspiracy theory, red tape board of all the problems, and then find where they connect and go, maybe our problem isn't that one email.
Yes.
Maybe our problem is that how we're intaking this to begin with isn't giving us the data that we need.
I love it. That's great. That's great. Just, yeah, instead of diving into that deep end, it is kind of a slow roll, and it is taking stock of what is around you, what our end goals are, what our frustrations are, and then figuring out what we can do about it. That's beautiful. That feels like a great place to end. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoyed this topic, please let us know. Like, subscribe, or reach out to us at info@cit-net.com or head out to our website, cit-net.com/podcast. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode.